I always tell people, as long as I've been coaching, advising, training consultants, which is 10, 12 years, give or take, I haven't seen an economic environment quite as challenging as this one for consultants in particular. And I had a conversation today with a consultant who said to me, I have been consulting since 1997, and I haven't seen an economic environment as challenging as this one. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I agree, but my window is a lot shorter. I've been consulting for longer than that, but my perspective from the viewpoint of coaching and advising and training consultants via boutique growth and 90-day pipeline, that's 10, 12 years old. I thought it was interesting to hear this very seasoned consultant who's done a lot of work for the past 30 years express the same sentiment. And the context here is he's facing challenges he's never faced before. He most recently, for the past decade, has been doing hundreds of thousands of dollars per year from a single anchor whale client, big blue chip company whose name you'd all recognize. And everything was great until their leadership had a change. New CEO came in, and all of a sudden the work dried up. And now he's got to go out and find new business. Hasn't really been in that position before. What to do, Carrie?
I'll give you the 30-second answer. We'll end the podcast and everyone will know.
There you go.
Perfect.
Simple.
What's interesting about the story you just relayed, though, I'm curious, what led him to say that the economic environment was challenging, given that he was coming from a very specific market of one, right, into the broader market? So tell me a bit more about what was behind that.
Yeah, it's pretty typical. I think what's happening in his experience, and this is true for a lot of consultants we speak to, is they have some data from their very limited network, right? So he obviously, after the work dried up with that anchor client, went out to his warm network and said, hey, look, I'm open for business and, I can take on projects. Do you have any work? That's kind of what people do, right? They go to the network and say, oh, do you have anything for me? And his network, who all know, like, trust him, believe in what he can deliver, and would otherwise be excited to work with him on many projects, all said, our hands are tied. We don't have budget. We're not spending right now. We'd love to, but can't do anything. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, how many people did he talk to? I don't know. 5, 10, 15, maybe 20. That's probably generous. That's one set of data. The other set of data is what you see on the news, right? Or what you read on LinkedIn, right? Recession, layoffs, really real consequence of all of that is a massive influx of consultants into the market. So supply of consultants is now through the roof. Folks aren't hiring. People can't get jobs. Lots of consultants. And a lot of organizations are now looking to consultants to pick up some of that slack that they now have as a result of the layoffs, right? So they're preferring the more, arm's length relationship of an independent consultant. So a lot of consultants in the market today, a lot more than there were a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And therefore more competition, harder to stand out. Mm-hmm. And then there's AI, this 2-letter thing called AI, which, I haven't seen much evidence of it disrupting the more sophisticated consultants, but certainly taking out the bottom end of the consulting market. So I think it's a combination of my network isn't buying, which is new because typically they have been in the past. And there's all this, doom and gloom stuff about the economy and the recession and AI. Is consulting dead? Kind of becomes the question that people are asking without saying the words.
Yeah. And my response to that is I don't think consulting is dead. I think that consultants who take the easy path are dying, to your point, right? People who could go out and just check in with half a dozen of their contacts and immediately know they're going to pick up some work. People that could, go out and sort of broadly say, well, I'm open to do whatever you need. And they would just get, they'd get signed to do something, didn't matter what. To me, those are the consultants that are struggling. What we find is that the folks who have a really clear and unique position, right? The folks who can really be crystal clear about what the problem is that they solve, and most importantly, the value of the problem that they solve, they're not having this same kind of existential feeling crisis. Yes, they're seeing, of course, everyone's seeing shifts in the economy, but they're not necessarily noticing it affect their personal bottom line in the same way. So to me, I think it's important that we talk about the approach that these consultants are taking when we talk about whether it's getting more difficult or impossible for them to grow their business.
Yeah, and I think it's worth commenting on the fact that there are many, many, many consultants who are not struggling, who are doing very well, even better than before. Look no further than some of our LinkedIn posts. I mean, we publish content on this topic all the time, and we speak to some of these challenges, and quite often in the comments we have folks saying, "Huh, interesting. I'm not feeling that. My business is growing. We're thriving. We're growing year over year." We certainly hear that from clients as well. So I think it's worth noting, and we don't have hard data on who's growing and who's not growing for the consulting market as a whole, but there are plenty of very strong and prevalent anecdotal evidence about consultants who are growing despite the challenging economic conditions. And one thing that comes to mind when to the point that you were making is it's really hard to conclude anything about the economy from the very small handful of conversations you're having with your network, right?
Yeah.
Again, how many folks did this person talk to who said they're not hiring? I mean, I said 20 at the end there. That's probably really generous, right? Most people are not having that many conversations, probably 5 or 10. And, to your point, a lot of people got by for decades, years, if not decades, just working that network.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as economic times were good and folks were spending money, there was no problem. And I don't blame them for that because it worked, right? Now the question is, if there's no business in my immediate network, where is the business?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the question I would ask folks who are feeling this pain is, let's say that your immediate network of people that know, like, and trust you and therefore give you business is 20 people, just making that number up for argument's sake. Let's say it's 20 people. And you've probably survived up until now on the back of business and referrals and introductions from those 20 people. Well, what if your network was 100?
Mm-hmm.
What happens then? And what if your network was 200? What if it was 300, right? And I want you to think about how big the market is compared to the very, very small circle of people that you already know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it. And we used to have the luxury where that small circle of people that you know could send work your way because you were a good, competent person, right? It was easier to justify. Whereas now, if the work's coming your way, it needs to be because it solves something very specific. So not only thinking about what would happen if your market was broader, but what would happen if you were clearer about what it is that you could do, because that will be the challenge, right? As you move out further from center, right? Further from you, further from your first degree connections, and you kind of move out into the world. These people don't know you in the same way. They haven't maybe worked with you before. They haven't maybe been the benefactor or the benefiter, but haven't benefited from your great work before. And so there's this real need to ensure that there's a reason that they do want to work with you, right? There's a reason that they call you. There's a reason that they connect people with you.
Yeah. Yeah. The bar has gone up for sure. Right. And I think it's the phenomenon that we're seeing of money being harder to come by and budgets being scrutinized more and more it's a real phenomenon. That's not made up. I think in the past it was, well, we know so-and-so, we know they do good work. Maybe they used to work for us, or, we've had a previous experience working with them. Let's bring them in for a project. We've got some room in the budget to spend. And they would rely on your reputation or their prior experience working with you to establish some belief that it's going to be a fruitful exercise without really knowing where it's going, right? I think those days are long gone at this stage, right? Now it's, whether I know you or not, frankly, right? It's what problem are we solving? How are we going to solve it? How confident are you we're going to get there? and what makes you the right person to solve this problem? What makes you uniquely positioned and to specialize in solving this problem? I give you an example. I was talking to a client yesterday, I believe it was, and here's somebody who, on the flip side, really well positioned, really clear, really focused, clear audience, clear problem set, tons of authority in a particular domain. Okay, people know why they're bringing him in. And I was coaching him on a sales conversation, and when we talked about pricing, he said, "Well, they asked for a proposal, and they said, I want to see the structure and the approach, what we're going to do, and I need to see the commercials and the pricing, but that's a side note. That's not really that important." Right? What does that tell you? There are people. This is a real story. As of September 2025. There are real organizations spending real money who are not terribly concerned about budget if it means they're going to find the right person to solve the right problem and get them the right outcome.
Mm-hmm. And this is where we should maybe talk about the fact that this story, right, which is, as you say, justified, partially true, that it's difficult out there, right? It's more difficult. The real question is, how are you as a consultant going to let that affect you? Because it's a nice, sort of comfortable, although, not very financially viable path to sit in a space where you're like, oh, well, I guess it's hard, right? I guess it's tough out there. I guess that means things are just going to be rough. I guess that means I'm going to have to, spend less. That means I'm going to have to change the way I live. That means I'm going to have to just give up on earning what it is that I want to earn and solving the problem that I want to solve. And to your point, that doesn't have to be the case. What you really need to decide is if there's going to be this separation between those who do well and, probably a larger number of people who don't do as well as they used to or as they could in an easier space, then where do you want to land and how do you get to that place? How do you get to the space where you are one of the ones who is being selected, right? Where you are someone who's in demand. And part of that is recognizing that it's possible, right? Part of that is recognizing that there are clear, actionable steps that you can take to get there. So to me, step one is getting over the story, right? Deciding that, yeah, okay, it's tough. And also that doesn't mean that nobody's ever hiring anyone again, right? Yes, things are challenging. What that means is I need to be better. And I'm going to figure out what the things that I need to do are that will get me there.
Well, I think the reality is a lot more stark than what you're presenting. I think that was true in the past where, look at this from our perspective. We are quite obviously in the business of coaching and training consultants to sharpen their positioning, execute on effective marketing, and grow their practices. And if you've been listening to the show for an amount of time, you've probably gathered the thrust of that message by now. In the past, we really had to fight against the status quo with folks, right? Because folks, to your point, Carrie, we're comfortable. Well, I've got a whale. I've got some business coming in. I've got 2, 3, 4 clients. I'm doing a bunch of random things for them. It's not really very focused. And I wouldn't say by any means that my life or my business are perfect, but it's comfortable. It's the devil I know, right? And you, Ahmed, Carrie, 90 Day Pipeline, you're all like positioning, be clear, be focused, be specific. That all sounds very disruptive. I'm just not quite sure I want to engage with that level of disruption and disrupt my little comfortable status quo. That was kind of our battle for a really long time. Today it's not, because those people are few and far between. Either they are now on the path of moving from the warm market to the cold market because they've realized they've had to, and they're committed to tightening up their positioning to survive the cold market, or they're out of business, or they're very quickly going to go out of business. And they're more focused at this stage on polishing up their resume than their consulting business. So I think you're spot on. But the difference in today's market is most people don't have the luxury at this stage of resting on their laurels and waiting for the warm market to rebound.
Yeah. So, I mean, the real question is, how do you sell to strangers, right? That's what we're talking about. How do you move outside of that comfort space that you've been living in and potentially doing really well at?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the big thing there is when it comes to going to the cold market and selling to strangers, if I could just share one idea that would be helpful to folks, it's that the burden of proof with regards to your value proposition is on you. They will assume that you are just like every other consultant out there. They will assume that you're just another generic consultant that's going to come in, do some work. What's the joke that a consultant is somebody who borrows my watch to tell me the time,
Sure.
right? And then keeps the watch. That's the reputation consultants have in the market, right? And so if they don't know you or have prior experience working with you and they don't know the value of what you deliver, they're going to assume like you're just like every other consultant and they will ignore you. And it's your job to prove to the cold market that you can deliver value, that you are not like all the other consultants out there they're looking at, and that you can genuinely solve the problems that they're facing and that they have a higher likelihood of achieving the outcomes and the goals they want to accomplish with you than without you. They will not give you the benefit of the doubt on any of these points. You have to prove it to them via your positioning and your marketing.